Welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Tapon. It's December 6, 2024, and I just interviewed Michael Zervos, who is in Lviv, Ukraine. He is on a journey to visit all the countries of the world, plus Palestine and the Vatican, and he's trying to do it faster than anybody else. He's on track. He's about 2/3 done, and I interview him talking about geopolitics today. I want to get his sense about people's reaction to the election of Donald Trump, the war in Ukraine, where he's at right now, and also Palestine, which he just visited. He got to see the West Bank as well as Israel. So tune into this fascinating discussion with a fascinating individual who's doing a whirlwind trip around the world. Let's hear from Michael Zervos. He is at the Project Cosmos with a K.com. Welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Tapon. I'm here with Michael Zervos, who is right now in Lviv, which is the major city in the west of Ukraine. And he's not a war correspondent, but he's doing something that may be a little bit even more insane than covering the front lines of Ukraine. He's trying to be the fastest person to travel to all the countries in the world. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you, Francis. I don't know about that. Maybe some people would have some different opinions on the matter, but I am indeed not a war correspondent, war journalist, but I am doing something that some people think is crazy. Yeah.
How many countries have you been to that actually have ongoing war of some sort, a violent conflict in the background that you've had to dodge?
Probably between 10 to 15.
That many?
I mean, the closest that I probably... Yeah. I mean, the closest that I've been, maybe, Lviv's not that close to the front. It's not, that close to the Donbass, but Palestine, I was there. That's quite close. And, I was in Tel Aviv, which is about less than 100 miles from Gaza. So, it was close, but not in the middle of it.
Sure. I mean, those counts. I mean, in Lviv, they've had shellings during the last 2+ years of fighting. So, I mean, any moment now while we're doing this recording, you could be blown to smithereens, and that's the end of your trip, dude.
Yeah, I know. I think about that sometimes. I think I'll go out with a bang. I've always thought that in my life.
All right. So we wanted to know what's the latest good stuff that you've been doing? Like, are you on track?
Yes, it's amazing. I mean, the last time we spoke, I think I was in Japan, perhaps. I mean, on camera, I think I was in Japan. So there was still, some decent obstacles ahead of me. I still had the Pacific Islands to tackle, and I also had the rest of the Middle East. And yes. I mean, many flights were kind of changed and arranged, and I know so many people who had just weather problems. And I mean, even when I was in the Pacific, there were some people who were touring the opposite sort of rotation of me in the Pacific Islands. And they didn't go to some of the countries they were expecting to. And I just managed to eke by. So yeah, I went through the Pacific and then also some countries in the Middle East. I finished both of those, as well as the rest of Asia, except for North Korea. And now I'm in Europe.
That's amazing. And just like the winds of good fortune blow your way, sometimes you have misfortune blowing away. I remember that one time when you got your ATM card gobbled up by a machine, but you've suffered much worse than that since then. So tell us some of your horror stories that when things did not exactly go your way, Michael.
It's funny that you actually brought that up, because I almost forgot about it, because now I'm in Europe. It's a lot easier to manage without it. But for the second time, an ATM ate my card, and it was right here yesterday in Ukraine. Listen, I was at a grocery store. I just because there was an ATM in there, and I was trying to pull out some currency. Most places here in Lviv take credit card, but I thought it might be good to have a little. And just at that exact moment, I spit out the money, and I was waiting for the card to come out, and they had a power outage. They've been having power outages, like rolling power outages every 3 hours, right? Or not every 3 hours, for 3 hours, like every day, more or less. And it happened for a minute. literally a minute, and the power went back on. And when the machine reset, you saw like the little Windows 98 whatever like interface iOS they what OS
Right.
they were using just to mock me. And I'm like waiting. Oh no, didn't spit it back out. Trying to interpret with the manager there, didn't speak English. You have to call the bank. I'm like, forget about it. I gotta go somewhere. I'm just, you can have my card for the second time. An ATM defeated me.
Oh my God, that's horrible. Now, what I'm a bit confused is why did the money pop out? Normally, they always pop out the card before the money.
Well, I mean, I've had it both ways where they spit out the money just so that you don't forget it. And then the other way around. I don't know. I mean, I've
Okay.
had definitely different machines do different things. But
Okay.
yeah, money came out. I got that. Honestly, I'd rather lose the $150 that I pulled out than the card. But fortunately, I'm in Europe, they take a lot of credit cards.
Anything that shocked you or surprised you about Ukraine itself? Everybody kind of imagines that you're dodging bombs every right and left, but you're having a calm conversation and people are walking by in the coffee shop. They don't seem to be wearing hard hats or military outfits. So, of course, things seem to be business as usual. And some people say that that's actually a problem in Ukraine, that things are so normal in so many places that the urgency of the war and the importance of the war has kind of taken a back seat to many people in Ukraine. Do you find that's true?
It's an interesting point. I've been to a lot of countries that have had, war for a lot longer than Ukraine, and there is sort of a desire, a resignment to the fact that it'll continue and they can't do anything about it, and they just try to find some type of normalcy. And yeah, I mean, I found that a lot of people are trying to live, uh, relatively happy existences. They're trying to create, they're trying to build businesses, they're trying to live normally, but I've spoken to many people now here, and I had a very interesting experience. I was at the National Theater, one of the largest theaters nearby. I was speaking to some of the actors who were not able to perform and really felt relegated to uselessness during the start of the war. I mean, what are they going to do? They're not soldiers. They make art, and what good is art in these circumstances? But I think they ended up realizing that people were still yearning for entertainment. They wanted to laugh. They wanted escapism. Sometimes the state kind of wants a certain kind of message too from the performances in the theater, and and they gave me their stories about how they began to perform again. And now there's one of the actors is like doing three plays, kind of back to back to back. And I spoke to a very famous movie star who's both in theater as well as in movies, and she was saying, she was like, yeah, there's some compartmentalization, but at the end, it bleeds through, and you just have to acknowledge this sort of paradox, or maybe this contradiction, that there is death on one side of our country, and many in the city itself. There's memorials of people who have died within the city, posted in different areas, flowers that people post, and different signs that I've translated with Google Translate just to read their stories. So I don't think that people have forgotten, but uh, I mean, it's I understand the desire for normalcy, and a lot of people have expressed that.
This is your first time in Ukraine, I imagine, right?
It is, yeah.
And so it's hard for you to compare whether there's been a shift, but because Donald Trump got elected, that some people say, Zelensky just threw out a peace proposal recently. Do you get a sense in the air that people are kind of resigned at this point, like, oh no, we're probably going to have to give up lots of land for peace?
There have been a couple people I've spoken to who are willing to speak a little bit more openly about it. That 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 thought that might be the case. And actually, I've met other Ukrainian refugees in different parts of Eastern Europe who have talked to me as well about this. In fact, I was in Slovakia and I was in Hungary, and there are many. I was trying to interview certain people, and I'm like, every other person I was meeting was a Ukrainian. But yeah, there have been some sentiments in that effect, and um, I think for some, they just want it to be over, and they're willing to, they'd be personally willing to concede this, not as though this was entirely up to them, but some of them have expressed that.
I imagine so. So how do you think it's going to end?
My best guess is that Ukraine is going to have to concede a portion of its land, and that there will be some type of tentative peace agreement. Given that um, there's, I don't know, there's some noises that Russian media has made some sort of how would you say, some critics of the war who have had some involvement in the party and have since left, who have said that that there may be that a larger amount of the Russian population has been growing more and more unsettled, and their willingness to fight is kind of being ground down, and the numbers are just catastrophic. I mean, I think when you look at them, you don't realize that 500,000 people, maybe 600,000 officially, of Russians have died, and it and often it just feels like they died, rather silently. And on the Ukrainian side, it's just as bad. Many of people here say that it's worse. So I think that there's probably a desire from by both sides for peace. I think the surveys are showing that too, that more Ukrainians are willing to concede just to have the war end. It was a Gallup poll, or the first of its kind, maybe, that it showed like 50% or so would like to see peace talks, and a large majority of those are willing to concede some of the land.
One of the most unique things about you, Michael, is the fact that you're gallivanting around the world at an incredible clip. And you have some insight after the U.S. election when Donald Trump won. You were able, in a span of just a month or two, to basically survey many countries who might, whether you want to hear it or not, their opinion about Donald Trump's reelection. And so the pulse, not just in Ukraine, of course, you were in Palestine, you've been in other places. What's your take on some of the reactions that either surprised you, or is there a general consensus?
I don't bring up politics. It's not really a great cup of tea to share when you're trying to interview people about happiness. But if people bring it up, I'll indulge with them. If I kind of looked at things regionally, I would say, from, like, say, east to west, like the Pacific Islands, there wasn't a whole lot of sentiment one way or another, not really conclusive. And generally, there wasn't a lot of concern for the election as far as I spoke to people. I spoke to, people who were educated and not in many different countries. In Southeast Europe or Southeast Asia and East Asia, I think they were kind of the most attached out of all of them. When they spoke to me about politics, if they brought it up at all. In Central Asia, there was some concern about the war and how each candidate would affect this. And since kind of the start of the campaign, Donald Trump, even in between his presidencies, he was speaking kind of questioning the reasoning for us funding who we're funding. Bear in mind, I'm speaking within the country, so I'm trying to be a little cryptic here. So they were saying these sorts of things in the Middle East. I would say there was a surprisingly large amount of people I spoke with across the Middle East, both before the election and after, who were kind of pleased with the outcome. Kind of Donald Trump being a wild card, where on the Democratic side, they thought, oh, well, Kamala's already been in office and she did jack shit for us. And even though she wasn't the president, they thought this administration just hasn't helped us at all. And both of them are kind of supportive of Israel, even though there's a wing of the Democratic Party, the more progressive side, that is more Palestinian leaning. They didn't really think that would be kind of the party that overrode the Democratic side. So they thought, maybe they saw Trump as an anti-war candidate, or the more anti-war candidate, more skeptical candidate. I don't really. I think that was kind of the notion there. In Africa, there was kind of this resignment that they were both garbage, and they disliked both of them. I mean, Africa's very large. North Africa, there was sort of the Middle Eastern sentiment, the desire for Palestinian a two-state solution, and maybe this hope that Trump might help that. Even in West Africa, a lot of Muslims there. I'm trying to recall. I don't know. I don't know if it was very conclusive there, enough for me to draw a pattern.
You were quite worried about getting into Palestine as well as Sudan, as well as North Korea. Now, you've skipped North Korea. I assume Sudan's still on the back burner. We'll talk to you in a couple of days where we're going to do another podcast to cover those things. But quickly, let's just cover Palestine. What was that experience? Was it hard? Did you get to step into Gaza, or I imagine you just got into the West Bank?
Yeah. So I went to the West Bank. That was by design. I wasn't intending to go to Gaza. It's just it's too dangerous, and I wasn't prepared to. I just wasn't prepared to go there. Like I said, I focus on happiness, which is a very difficult subject in all of Palestine. But I visited Bethlehem. I visited Jericho and Hebron, and it was easy for me to visit. It was easier than I thought it was going to be. It was merely a bus ride in.
No special visa, you just showed your passport. That's it?
Yeah. I didn't actually, on the way into it, I didn't even show a passport. On the way back, though, I did hit the famous checkpoint there. Was it checkpoint 300? I'm forgetting the exact number, but it's the one that if you're Palestinian and you stop there, you're going to be taken out of the bus. They're going to examine each one of you, and they're going to take a look at your card. Typically, if you're not Palestinian, you're allowed to stay on the bus. But frankly, I kind of look Palestinian, and I figured it'd just be better practice for me to stand with them, and I did, and I showed them my Greek passport, and they didn't even look that that closely at it. They just let me back on the bus, and I went back into West Jerusalem. So it was pretty easy.
Amazing. Okay, so we're gonna conclude today's episode, but I'm gonna definitely have you back in a couple days where we're going to talk again about your journey, but in more detail, especially focusing on what I want to know more about, how you do all this filming and how many days you have left, and what's the prognosis for some of the tough countries, and kind of like the vision for what's coming down the pipe. So thank you again, Michael. Before we go, just remind people how people can follow you.
For day-to-day, mostly updates, you can find me at the Project Cosmos on Instagram. I also have a TikTok where you see largely the same videos. And then there's a website, project-cosmos.com.
Which has all the links to all the other stuff, we'll put that in the show notes, of course.
Yes.
So thank you, and we'll see you soon. And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.